What makes a good video game story? Is it memorable moments, lovable characters, witty dialogue, top-notch voice acting? Yes, all of these certainly help. I think games that focus solely on the writing and performances miss out on what makes video games unique: player agency. There is no other medium that allows the human experiencing the story to actually act it out and take physical part in it. When people playing video games explain what happened in the game, they don't say, "Oh, Mario jumped on a Goomba." They say, "I jumped on that Goomba. I did it. It was me." This might sound like a small change, but this extra layer of connection brings the player into a story in a way few other experiences can. There is so much potential for engaging, powerful, and meaningful storytelling in this medium, and one of the games that takes full advantage of this is 2018 indie darling Celeste. You don't need me to tell you how awesome Celeste is. It has tight controls, a charming art style, a poignant and evocative soundtrack, and it is just packed with creative mechanics and fun details. I mean, just look at this. And this. And that. It's just so much fun. What really makes Celeste special, though, is it perfectly melds its mechanics with its story. It takes full advantage of the medium of video games, and that allowed a small indie team to compete for a Game of the Year award with AAA studio games. In this video, I'll break down Celeste's story structure and explain how it uses game mechanics to reinforce that structure. Welcome to Play Tracing, where we break down games to learn how to make better ones. Let's get started. There are lots of ways that you can break down a story, but for this video, I'll be using Dan Harmon's story circle. Harmon is an accomplished writer who has created shows like Community and Rick and Morty. He posted an incredible breakdown of the structure, which I will put in the description for those of you who want to learn more. But essentially, Harmon argues that there are 8 sections to any good story. It's easier to understand them by using other stories as reference, so to give you an idea of what we're talking about, here is the plot of Star Wars mapped to the story circle. Spoiler alert for Star Wars, I guess. 1. A character is in a zone of comfort. We are introduced to the protagonist and the world that they inhabit. For Star Wars, after an action-packed opening to hook the viewer, we are introduced to Luke Skywalker living a quaint farm life on Tatooine. 2. But they want something. There is something off balance that the protagonist is at odds with. Luke is bored and he wants to go off on adventures and fight the Empire like the rest of his friends. 3. They enter an unfamiliar situation. The inciting incident, when the story properly starts. This is when Luke's aunt and uncle are killed, and he decides to rescue the princess from the Empire. 4. Adapt to it. The character deals with a series of challenges. Luke goes to the sketchy cantina, escapes Tatooine with Han Solo, gets trapped on the Death Star, and fights stormtroopers. 5. They get what they wanted. Even for story structures, this one's a bit abstract, but for our purposes, this is when the protagonist gets what they think they want. In Star Wars, Luke rescues Princess Leia, the goal at the beginning, even though he is a little short for a stormtrooper. 6. Pay a heavy price for it. The character deals with the consequences of all of their actions that they've taken up to this point. This is typically the character's lowest point. Luke has rescued the princess, but as they are escaping, Obi-Wan Kenobi is killed, and even worse, they have inadvertently led the Empire right to the Rebel Alliance. 7. They return to their familiar situation. The character has hit rock bottom, and they can now begin to emerge from the chaos that they have endured. Luke gets in his X-Wing and goes off to blow up the Death Star before the Death Star blows up the rebellion. 8. Having changed. The character beats the final boss, aces the test, or achieves whatever it is that they set out to do, but different. Luke uses the Force from his training with Obi-Wan and is able to blow up the Death Star, something he wouldn't have been able to do at the beginning of the story. So now that we understand what makes up a story, we can map the events in Celeste to this structure. And it just so happens that Celeste's story maps up quite well. And importantly, there are almost always developments in the game mechanics that change the player's experience to better match the story. Let's break it down beat by beat so I can show you what I mean. This section of the story is all about introducing the audience to the protagonist and the world. The introduction to Celeste's protagonist, Madeline, takes place over the course of the prologue and the first steps area. In cutscenes, Madeline is shown to be determined, resilient, and more than a little stubborn. The mechanics of the game, in turn, reinforce those ideas. Celeste, it's not the easiest game I've ever played. But importantly, death and failure are not heavily punished. Levels are short, and when you die, instead of getting treated to a big Souls-like game over screen and 30 seconds of loading, the player is immediately popped back to the beginning of the level to try again. In this way, Celeste teaches you that dying over and over again is not only okay, it's expected. And this encourages the player to experience the world as Madeline is experiencing it, by stubbornly overcoming the challenges ahead. The second and third beats of the story both occur in the second area of the game, Resurrections. This is also when we get introduced to the game's antagonist, Madeline, a physical manifestation of Madeline's anxiety and self-doubt. When we are first introduced to her, we don't know this yet, but anytime you see a purple version of yourself with big red eyes bust out of a mirror, you know everything's not exactly fine and dandy. Mechanically, Madeline activates big dream blocks that the player can use to explore the level. Things start to get weird, and the player starts to understand that this isn't your typical hike. In a GDC talk, Maddy Thorson, the designer of Celeste, said that they were going for a dream-turned-nightmare effect with this level, and this perfectly mirrors the transition from relative comfort to discomfort in the story. Harmon talks a lot about a good story being a circular journey from order and familiarity to chaos and uncertainty, and then back again. The third beat of the story is when the protagonist crosses the threshold from the familiar world to the dangerous one. This lines up with the boss fight at the end of Resurrections, and accordingly, this is when the story begins in earnest. Madeline has already started climbing the mountain, but that's not what the story is really about. It's about her trying to escape her anxiety. Fitting then that this first boss fight is about running away from Madeline, escaping her. The boss fight starts with Madeline telling Madeline to give up and go home. Madeline and the player both commit to starting this journey by evading her and continuing the trek up the mountain. This section of the story is often the longest section. In movies, this is often where there's a long montage, like the training montage in Rocky with the famous music and he finishes on the big stairs and it's great. In Celeste, this takes place over the course of the Celestial Resort, Mirror Temple, and Golden Ridge areas. Madeline sees progress and setbacks over the course of these areas, learning to stand up for herself to Mr. Roshiro, even though Madeline comes in and messes it up at the end. She learns a tool for navigating panic attacks, more on that later, and she is able to save her new friend from a bunch of weird squid fish monsters. Mechanically, the player is forced to overcome trickier and trickier challenges like wind, moving obstacles with increasingly challenging to predict movement patterns, and the aforementioned squid dudes. This is pretty standard game design stuff, but I'd argue that it doesn't need to be much more complicated than that. Now we're getting to the good stuff. This is where the story really starts to twist and turn. This is also, unfortunately, where Celeste doesn't really support its story with mechanics, as this all takes place in a cutscene. However, the cutscene plays out in an interesting enough way, and the payoff for this moment is so good that it doesn't really bother me too much. It also provides a nice break from all the tough platforming. So, in the cutscene, Madeline approaches Madeline and basically breaks up with her. Madeline thinks she knows what she wants, to leave behind Madeline, and the game lures you into a false sense of security with Madeline acting meek and hurt until we reach the next beat of the story. Time to hit rock bottom. After playing along with Madeline's breakup for a bit, Madeline basically says, "Psych!" and completely pulls the rug out from underneath her. She starts literally crawling out of her dialogue portrait, which is an awesome effect. They even set it up right from the beginning with her hair falling out of the portrait in Resurrections, and man, I just love this game so much. After rebuking Madeline's last attempt to run away, she sends her off of a cliff to literal rock bottom at the base of the mountain. It looks like all progress has been lost. This takes the player to the next area of the game, Reflections. This area introduces these floating feather power-ups, which are in and of themselves an amazing link from story to gameplay, as the technique Madeline learned to calm herself on the gondola earlier lets her temporarily move around freely. It's so nice. After her moment of reflection, Madeline realizes that she needs to embrace her anxiety instead of running away from it. It's taken tremendous hardship, but she's starting to change for the better. Before we continue, we need to understand one more thing about the story circle. The different sides of the circle mirror each other. The journey down to the depths of the subconscious mirrors the journey back up to the real world. In this way, this section of the story mirrors the road of trials. The protagonist must change again before they can return to some sense of equilibrium. In my opinion, Celeste does this better than just about any other game, and it's amazing. At the end of this area, Madeline confronts Madeline again, only this time to accept her. In a very empowering moment for both the player and Madeline, there is a climactic boss fight where you must make contact with Madeline to win, which perfectly mirrors the first boss fight at the beginning of the game where you must avoid her to progress. After you win, Celeste gives us its most elegant bit of design to support the story. After embracing Madeline, you gain an extra dash, represented by Madeline's hair changing to a pink that sits in between her red and Madeline's purple hair. This extra dash will allow you to complete the game. We have reached the culmination of the story, and we get to see the payoff for all of the challenges and obstacles that the protagonist has overcome on their journey. Madeline can now finally reach the summit of the mountain and accomplish what she set out to do. In a lot of games, this would be a final boss, but in Celeste, it's a revisiting of all of the different mechanics and areas you've seen over the course of the game, reminding you of the incredible growth Madeline, and by extension the player, have both undergone. In addition to the extra dash, these little purple power-ups appear that make Madeline show up and help Madeline reach new areas of the level. After revisiting all of the previous areas on the mountain, there's one final platforming gauntlet before reaching the summit and finally completing the game. Madeline began this journey trying to climb a mountain to escape her anxiety. She ends it having climbed the mountain, but only after fully embracing it and herself. Celeste is a special game. In the GDC talk I mentioned before, Thorson talks about the team's thought process around designing levels. The full game tells the story that we just broke down. Each area tells a smaller story that supports that larger one, and each individual level in these areas tell their own small stories that support the story of the area that they are in. It's like a story Russian nesting doll. The story and mechanics were baked together from the very beginning, and man, does it show. I hope more games can learn from Celeste to make even better experiences for players in the future. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to give the video a like or even subscribe. There are just too many interesting things happening in this game to fit into one video, so if you have any thoughts of your own, I'd love to see them in the comments. Catch you all next time.